Back again with MITech TV, and we have a longtime friend, Patrick Anderson, from the CEO of Anderson Economic Group in Lansing. You've probably seen many of his surveys, economic surveys in particular, for a variety of topics over the years. And right now he's looking at the UAW strike, which very interesting strike. I've covered the auto industry, as you know, for a long time. And typically what they do is target one company and then kind of make that the master contract they force on everybody else. But this new UAW president, he's got a whole different strategy here. It's kind of different, but it appears to be really working, right?
Nice to be back with you. And you're right. If you've watched the auto industry for a long time, you notice there's a lot different this time. And we highlighted this before the strike deadline came. We pointed out, for example, that inventory is way smaller than it was before. In fact, it's less than a quarter what it was when we went into 2019. And the UAW has abandoned what had been a tried and true and successful use of what they call pattern bargaining, which is picking one company, bargaining hard with that company, getting an agreement, and then trying to use that as the pattern. That goes all the way back to Walter Reuther. So it was a tried and true strategy, and they're not using that this time. Plus the rhetorical level much harsher than I recall in the past. Some things were said that I think are just downright regrettable. And as a result of that and other factors, we are sitting here already more than 3 weeks into a strike that's cost the industry, the workers in the industry, the suppliers in the industry, even dealers and consumers, quite a lot of money.
Now, you sent me some maps. I put this on multiple share. I don't know if you want to be able to pull up any of your maps and show folks what they look like. But if not, we can just talk about your maps. But go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just curious if you have heard anything about why they abandoned the pattern bargaining concept. Because
I don't know.
They're instead doing these little strategic work stoppages at various plants of the big three. That
right.
they haven't walked off completely.
Look at our analysis. What has happened this time is that the UAW strategy has in fact reduced the losses of wages to their members and the drain on their strike fund, and it's increased the penalty that has been paid by suppliers in particular and dealers. So this is definitely a deliberate strategy, as Shawn Fain, the president of the UAW, said it was. And of course, the UAW has the right to strike like any other worker in a unionized industry, and they're exercising it with a lot of, let me say, strategic thought in terms of how to affect different companies.
So I'm pulling up your map that you sent to us earlier, and you can see, why don't you explain what you got there in the map rather than me trying to explain it?
Now, this is one of the maps that we've done, and we've updated it 3 or 4 times already through the strike. This is on the Anderson Economic Group website, so you can go and see it now. What we've done is we've identified production facilities and some of the other facilities, such as parts facilities across the country. And we've identified those there, and you can see that a substantial number of these facilities are in the Michigan area. And you start to add these up, it's quite a lot of people that are on strike, and it's affected all the way across the country. But notably, you have serious losses concentration right here in the heart of the auto industry in the United States, which is Michigan.
So how does the pain of this particular strike differ from the pain of prior strikes?
You can look at what happened this time thus far compared to 4 years ago, and the Anderson Economic Group methodology is calibrated based on looking at what happened in 2019 and actually looking afterwards at indicators of income, GDP, of what the financial disclosures were from General Motors at the time. So we use that to calibrate this time. The UAW's stand-up strike strategy has been successful in spreading and tactically deploying the damage across 3 different companies and their supplier network, and to some degree the dealers for General Motors and Stellantis, because they struck parts distribution centers that affect dealers. So it has meant more losses for suppliers. The low inventory has meant that dealers are much more sensitive to loss in vehicles that are in the pipeline, and less loss for wages, which if you are the UAW and you want to maximize your ability to affect the behavior of the automakers and minimize the cost to your own workers, it's a clever strategy at the very least.
And you were mentioning that he's issued some harsh statements. I guess he's a Bernie Sanders acolyte, from what I understand from doing some research on him, because I've seen him wearing T-shirts like "Eat the Rich" and things like that.
Eat the Rich, yeah. Eat the Rich was actually the headline in a New York Times profile that was done the week before. And I talked with a reporter about it, and then I said, "Whoa, there it is." He's using the T-shirt, "Eat the Rich," but I mean, the UAW, he is an elected leader for the UAW, so it's the first time their members in a long time have elected their own leader. He is representing to some degree the sentiment of a lot of the workers, and he's been very effective at getting on the table. If you think about it, he had on the table offers for 20% wage increases from 3 OEMs before the strike began. So in terms of just pure wanting to get something for the members, he's obviously been very successful. The problems that are out there, and they're out there in any strike, so it's not as if this is a one-time issue, but striking hurts a lot of people. It hurts the workers, and it undermines also the ability of the companies to invest. And the rhetoric here, throwing the proposal in the trash and videotaping it, and I think comparing the GM, Ford, and Chrysler with the enemies of the United States in World War II, I think that's very unfortunate rhetoric, my own sense, because we want a healthy automobile industry. That means workers and employers. They have to make money to stay in business. And I'm not going to tell anybody how much wages they should get. I'm not going to tell any employer how much they should pay, but we do want to be working together very soon, because this industry has a lot of competitors out there.
Yeah, one of them is, of course, Musk, who's smiling right now because he knows that these contracts are going to drive up costs for the Detroit 3, and he's already cutting his costs, or at least the retail sales value, for many of his vehicles to try to steal market share, I think. Is that the strategy, do you think?
I think you are right to point out Elon Musk is watching this. I'll say also Toyota, Honda make a lot of vehicles in the United States. And this is something that's different than it was, say, 25 years ago. A lot of vehicles are made in the United States by workers that are paid well and are not represented by the UAW, that are not on strike. And those cars are purchased by a lot of people, and as they should. Americans have choices, as they should. And this is something that the automakers and the UAW need to keep in mind, because if you end up with a contract, or you end up such a bitter agreement afterwards that people don't want to buy your product, you've lost the war. You do not want that to happen. And I do have some concerns about this now, 3 weeks in, with the rhetoric in terms of talking about the companies as if they're the enemy. I think that's not a healthy debate.
There have been some movements, though, and what can only be described from what I've heard as victories for the UAW, like bringing the battery plants into the agreement. Do you think it's one of those things where it's, trash talk during the game, but when the final whistle blows, everybody goes back to the bar or something? Or do you think some of this damage might be really long term.
Well, let's hope that's the case. And I mean, you can, again, that was the Anderson Economic Group website, which people can look at. You can see those maps. Of course, it's a bargaining situation. I can't take that away, and it's not my role to take that away from either the manufacturers or the workers. That's when you are in a unionized industry, you're going to have this bargaining, and there'll be disparate views. But referring to your employers as the enemy is not a good idea. They're not your enemy. Talking about, say, Ford that built the Willow Run plant so that we could build bombers in World War II, even implicitly associating them with the enemy of the United States in World War II is just wrong. That shouldn't be done. And I'm concerned that harshness is gonna last for too long.
My concern also is the OEMs and tier ones have a lot more money than the tier twos and threes who are just barely hanging on by their fingernails in general. What kind of impact do you think this is going to have on the smaller manufacturers?
I'm very concerned about suppliers. And if you see the Anderson Economic Group analysis, it's on the AndersonEconomicGroup.com website. We have supplier losses of 1.6 billion. A lot of these are small companies. They don't have $1 billion market cap, let alone a billionaire running them. In some cases, they're family-owned businesses. They literally don't know whether their product's going to be sold next week. They don't know how they're going to pay their workers 2 weeks from now. These are people in real trouble, and they're very important to our industry and our economy. And they don't have a vote in this. They didn't vote either for or against striking. So I'm quite concerned about them. If you're a UAW worker, do you deserve a raise? How much? That's really up to you. If you're a manufacturer, you should get a settlement. You should pay more. You should have some agreement. How much? That's up to you. But at least those two parties have votes in this. The suppliers and the dealers and the consumers, they can't vote in this. And some of them are suffering.
So do you have any sense of how much longer this is going to go on? I mean, what are you hearing?
I mean, I watched, like a lot of America, Sean Fain, president of the UAW, last Friday. And I saw General Motors' statement today. We try not to take sides here. To the extent we have a side, we're on the side of the state and the people that work here and live here. We want the industry to go on, and I don't know how much longer it's going to go on. I will say that every week it goes on after this week, we are losing customers because Americans have some patience for labor bargaining, but don't make a customer wait a month to buy a car. Don't make them wait to get their car fixed and assume that they'll just go back to buying whatever you make without any hesitation. Some of those customers, if they leave, they're not coming back.
Do you have any idea so far into the strike how much money has been lost in total? I know you mentioned more than $1 billion next week, but where are we at cumulatively?
Yeah, the estimate we have is $5.5 billion lost, and that's real losses here. That's not counting any reputational losses. We're not double counting strike pay. We're not adding any market losses for stockholders or anything. This is the actual hard losses in our industry and very close to our industry. And about a third of that's right here in Michigan, and it's already occurred. I mean, the auto industry is extremely powerful for creating income, jobs, value added. And when you shut it down, it costs a lot of money. And so what we're seeing is the flip side of the coin. When you've got a great industry that produces a lot and has a lot of investment, if you shut it down, it costs you a lot.
So in terms of the losses, what's unusual this time compared to prior strikes? Who is getting hurt by this tactic that wasn't getting hurt by the old tactic of pattern bargaining?
And if you compare this with the the 6-week strike from 2019. I mean, the cost is now more than it was for that strike. Why is it more? Well, you got 3 automakers, not one. So it's 3 automakers for about half the length. 3 times as many automakers, half the length. You got not as many assembly plants, but you've actually hit parts and distribution centers. Your inventory was much less this time, which means dealers feel it quicker. Customers are affected sooner. People who need repairs are affected sooner, where that wasn't happening as much. You know, it never interrupted, say, Ford and Chrysler customers last time. It's affecting Chrysler, GM customers now. And suppliers are really getting hammered this time. However, the UAW workers, and they've lost a significant chunk of wages. I mean, there's $500 million in wages loss. A lot of that's UAW workers, but compared to striking all 3, that's much less than you would otherwise think.
Yeah, I mean, the other point here is they're making $500 a week in strike pay. And when you're used to making $1,500 a week or so with overtime, that's a big hit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no sugarcoating the fact that a very large chunk of this is wages lost by people, including people who went on strike because they wanted to earn more money. They wanted different wage work rules. They have every right to do that if that's what they want. They obviously voted in strong numbers to authorize a strike, so it's absolutely their right to do that. And you know, most Americans, including me, say, well, of course you got to give them a raise, given the inflation that we're all suffering under. They didn't cause the inflation, but I sure hope we get a good, reasonable contract soon.